Roger Waters is currently rehearsing the music for the new show and preparing the sophisticated stage setting. Mal Redding's been along and asked him where he got the ideas from when he wrote the music for the pros and cons of hitchhiking.
It's about relationships between men and women, particularly seen specifically in this album as between this man and his wife, and seen within the context of 42 minutes of one night when they're in bed together and the man is dreaming.
Dipping in and out of the dream, and also his wife lying next to him as he breaks back into consciousness and talks about the dream that he has. Where does the hitchhiking element come into it, though? Is it part of the dream, or is it part of the real side of his life, the conscious side of his waking hours?
Well, I've used hitchhiking really as a convenient metaphor for relationships between men and women. The idea of, if you look upon the idea of life being a journey and of picking people up and traveling together and dropping somebody off, and who owns the car and who's getting the ride, or whether things are mutual, and it's a convenient allegory within which to frame ideas about that.
On the subject of hitchhiking, now, there was a very, very funny science fiction comedy series called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Douglas Adams wrote it when he was at college, lying in a field in Vienna on a hitchhiking trip, and he conceived the whole idea lying in the field one day with no money in his pocket and forced to hitchhike all over Europe. Now, that was the idea he got for The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Did you, in a similar sort of way, get the same ideas from a real-life experience, something that you saw or experienced?
I did an awful lot of hitchhiking when I was younger. And I think maybe this album and show came originally out of a memory of a dream that I'd had that was about traveling in a car somewhere in Europe. And although the specific detail of the dream really has nothing to do with that, it was about a sense of unease in a foreign land. There was a strange wasteland in this dream that I had. And in a way, the album is about on a surface level, it's about two things that happen to you when you're asleep and or when you're just waking up. One, about two moments, two opposite moments that happen to people. One is a moment of panic, that you get an anxiety attack at 4 o'clock in the morning when you suddenly bolt upright with the sweat pouring off you in a complete panic, thinking, which we've all experienced, I think, probably waking from nightmares, or just, the demons take you over at that time of the night. And the converse of that, which most people I've spoken to have experienced as well, is that, again, in the moment of waking, in the darkness, when you suddenly feel that you've got the answer, not a specific answer, but you suddenly feel as if you understand something that you hadn't grasped before, and you may not be able to put your finger on what that is either, but there's a real feeling that got it, and sometimes it's about something specific in your waking conscious life. And I've even on odd occasions reached out and taken a pencil and paper and written down what it was. And of course you wake up in the morning and it's gibberish. You think, what the hell was all that about? But nevertheless, the moment is very powerful.
Those moments, in a way, are, one could say, are very surreal moments. They're not really part of either world, the unconscious or the conscious world. They're not something that we live with in our daily lives. When we wake up from a dream, it very quickly disappears from our consciousness and it becomes a memory, and you only remember the most obvious aspects of it. You don't remember. Now, that's something that the Pink Floyd have always excelled in, and that is expressing themselves in a surreal way through their music. Perhaps yourself, more particularly than any other member of the group, as you've been the main songwriter. Now, with The Wall, you wrote about and the way he saw the world, and in a way, a very depressing look at the world as well. I mean, the images that you painted in The Wall and subsequently in the movie. In a similar way, you're saying the same about the pros and cons of hitchhiking, one man's view of dreams and reality, the way in which those two work together. Is that a continual theme, do you think? That's the way that you see your writing in music today?
Yeah, probably. I think unless you train as a writer, I had no idea that I would ever write anything. When I bought my first guitar aged 15 and decided I was going to be a rock star along with umpteen million other kids, I had no idea really that I would ever write songs. And in the early years, I didn't have to because Sid was writing all the material, and it was only after he stopped writing that the rest of us had to start trying to do it. And I'd always been told at school anyway that I was absolutely bloody hopeless at everything, so I had no real confidence about any of it. So I've come to writing songs almost without noticing it happening to me. And so the craft that I've developed over the years has happened in a very has developed in an organic way. What I'm trying to say, I think, is that I haven't yet developed the techniques maybe that are necessary for looking at a situation outside myself and writing about that. My writing depends entirely upon feelings which come from inside me, and therefore the songs tend to be written in the first person or very much about me and how I feel about things.
Back to the production, the pros and cons of hitchhiking. Now, not only is it an album, which has just come out, but also you're taking it onto the stage. You're performing some major concerts in Britain and as well in the United States. Going back to The Wall, a similar project where you took it to concert halls, and it was both a visual as well as musical presentation, and then onto a film. What's the pros and cons of hitchhiking going to be like? Is it going to be an extension of The Wall as the music is, or is it going to be entirely different?
It's similar in the sense that we're putting together a big production to fill those large halls. I mean, to describe very briefly what the Present Con show's going to be like, what we were attempting to do is to turn the whole of the stage by using back projection screens and flats that fly in, which are designed to designed with false perspective to create sort of trompe l'oeil, to create the illusion of 3 dimension on the stage. And the hope is to create the illusion that you're actually in the room with the characters to whom the story is happening. And then by flying the flats out, we lose the room and come back to it later on. And we're using screens that come down from the ceiling and 3 synced 35mm projectors.
So it's going to be quite a visual presentation as well as the sound. Now, I know that on the record you've been using this fabulous sound technique called holophonics, which was brought about by the scientist Hugo Zuccarelli, and you used some of it on the final cut, I believe, and more of holophonics on this new album.
On this album, I had basically it's recordings made in a dummy head, using a dummy head that is physiologically an exact copy of a human head. But there's more to it than that. Zuccarelli believes that we perceive direction or position in sound through emitting a signal ourselves. And it's the way our brain interprets the interference patterns created between incoming high-frequency information and this outgoing tone that allows us to isolate exactly where the sound is coming from. And there must be something to his theory, because if you listen to the demonstration tapes of his thing, you can hear up and down movement from high-frequency things like snapping fingers. Well, we used it throughout the recording So, for instance, if we were recording a piano, we would have conventional miking of the piano, but also there'd be this head leaning over the side of the piano, peering into it, and we would mix that sound in with the conventional miking, and it gives it a strange. You can't put your finger on exactly what it is, which is why it's quite good for this stuff about dreams. It does give the sound of instruments as well as sound effects and things a strange presence that you don't get using conventional miking techniques.
Now, you mentioned back to the stage performance, the back projection and the various props that come into the stage throughout the dream, if you like, throughout the bedroom scene where the man and woman sleep through the night and he goes through the experiences. In past productions, you've also used things like miniature Spitfire fighters from various parts of your career, the Pink Floyd's career. At least you did with The Wall anyway. Are you going to use the same sort of props in the audience and get them involved?
No, when I started finding myself drifting in the direction of producing inflatables and things for this show as well, I very sharply slapped myself on the wrist and retreat. I am trying in this show to keep the thing simpler, to use the money, because all this, as you can imagine, costs a bloody fortune, to use it in a simpler way. I want it all to be more graphic, stark, less round, if you like, than it has been. I'm using quadraphonic sound in order to involve everybody, but there won't be anything flying out into the audience.
With the live show, The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking, part 2 is the new production, but part 1 is some of the older Pink Floyd material, older and newer material. I mean, you're going right back to the second album, Source of All the Secrets, I think, right through to The Wall. Why did you choose to break it into those parts? I mean, why have you got older and newer material side by side? Because with The Wall, that was one production and that's all you did.
Right, well, The Wall was a double album, and so it made a whole show. Previously, at previous Pink Floyd tours, well, the one before that was in 1977, and we did Animals was the second half of the show, and Wish You Were Here was the first half. Before that, Wish You Were Here used to be the second half, and Dark Side of the Moon was the first half. Before that, so we used to do the last two albums, so that the two halves of the show were always. I haven't got another album, so I got to do a summit.
Has it been a request maybe from some of the fans that you do some of the older material anyway? Because I, for one, enjoyed those albums.
No, I mean, I haven't, there's fans didn't know I was doing a show. No, I just sat down and I thought to myself, well, what am I going to do? I can't just do the pros and cons. And I thought, well, obviously I've got to use my songs. So I thought, well, I'll do a retrospective of they're only my songs, I may say. The songs are nothing to do with anybody else. In terms of the writing, that is. And so then I went back and I started listening, I made a list, first of all, of songs that I seemed to remember that I liked, and made up a short list and listened to them all, and then threw a load out, and then made a cassette off the albums of about 15, and whittled it down to 8 or 9 songs that I finally decided to do.
You mentioned Eric Clapton is alongside you playing guitar and helping you in live performance, as well as on the recording, of course. Who else is actually playing with you in the pros and cons of hitchhiking? Which other musicians do you have?
Well, Andy Newmark is the drummer. Some of these people say, who's Andy Newmark? But if anybody who's in the music business, knows who he is, because they remember his work going all the way back beyond Sly Stone and a lot of work later with John Lennon. So there's him. He's wonderful. Who else? Michael Kamen, who did all the arrangements for The Wall and for the final cut, is playing piano.
And he also helps produce this project, right?
Yeah, he's co-producing it with me. Well, he co-produced the record. Who else is playing? Chris Stainton, who came via Eric, because Andy Bound did the work on Hammond organ stuff on the record, and he's out with Status Quo, so I needed somebody else. And Eric suggested Chris, who is fantastic. Mel Collins was playing saxophone. Doreen Chanter and Katie Kassoon, who's sung on the album, doing the background vocals. Tim Rennick is playing some rhythm guitar and some lead guitar he plays as well. He and Eric share solos, and he is incredible as well.
How do you feel about embarking on this project? Although it was in, say, parallel to The Wall as a solo project, could be a Pink Floyd project, and The Wall was accepted, as you said earlier, as a project to be encompassed by the Pink Floyd, and this has become a Roger Waters solo project. How do you feel about actually going on stage with people who aren't from the original band at all, and musicians that may have played with you as backing musicians on Pink Floyd tours, but aren't actually, they are the mainstays of the orchestra, if you like, now? How do you feel about that?
Wonderful. None of these people ever played with Pink Floyd. Except Michael played piano on Final Cut, but nobody else has had anything to do with Pink Floyd. It's great. It's a revelation to me. You know, I've never played with other musicians, really, apart from, as you say, using session people on Floyd albums. It's terrific fun.
And is this the sort of mark of you breaking from the Pink Floyd entirely now? Are you literally embarking on your own solo career now and never to return to the Pink Floyd or the other members of that band?
One hesitates to be too definite about these things. I read last week that Deep Purple had just got back together again. So if Deep Purple can get back together again, anything can happen at any time, anywhere in the universe.
How do you feel about David Gilmour's solo project and Rick Wright going off to form Z with Dave Harris? How do you feel about that? Because you were together as a unit for a very long time.
Yeah, well, Rick left the band in 1980, I think, so that's 4 years ago. Good luck to him, really. I hope they get on splendidly.
And what about David with his solo project, which seems to be doing very well on stage and recording-wise?
Well, good luck to him too. You know, there's room in the world for everybody.
And I mean, the room for you all to work as solo artists and to have solo projects like this, to have individual ideas, which you don't necessarily want to do with people that you've worked with for a number of years.
Absolutely, yeah.
So where to from here? Now, The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking is currently in production. You're doing the visual and musical side of it. A lot of pieces that have got to come together at the same time. Do you see into the future, or is this the main thing that's occupying your mind at the moment?
Yeah, I'm not really looking beyond the end of this tour. Though, I mean, having said that, I do have some things in the pipeline that I may well work on in the future.
It's quite a gamble to take a production of this size. As you mentioned earlier, the amount of money it's costing you to put the stage setting together, the musicians, etc. It's quite a gamble in the sense that the Pink Floyd as a group have always been anonymous. They've never been individuals that you would readily recognize unless you were a real hardcore Pink Floyd fan. You wouldn't readily recognize them walking down the street. So, say, in this country, Roger Waters doing live concerts, you've got to get over the barrier of who's Roger Waters to a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. It's far more of a problem than I realised. I hadn't the slightest idea how much of a problem it was. You know, when I embarked on this, and neither had Harvey or the other promoters in Europe. Anyway, I think we all, you know, because all the promoters and everybody involved with me did know what I did with Pink Floyd, and all the work I used to do. And there was an assumption made that the public at large knew as well, that the people who'd gone out and bought tickets for Pink Floyd shows would automatically go, oh, he's doing a show, that would be good, I'll go and buy a ticket. It hasn't happened at all. I mean, we're not doing too badly now, thank God, touch wood. The tickets are beginning to move. I think largely thanks to the kind of vicious attacks there have been in the press recently upon me.
You mean publicity, good or bad, is better for you than none at all?
Well, there was a terrible piece in the Evening Standard at the beginning of last week, and ticket sales picked up no end after it. It described the record as marking a new low in recorded music.
Writing music is, in some ways, for a lot of people, very grueling, a very arduous process where it takes them hours, days, months to get musical ideas together. They may get chords, they may get the basic outline of a song together, and they piece it together very slowly. Other musicians, other composers find it very easy to knock off 3 or 4 minute songs every day of their lives. How are you? Do you find it difficult to write music, to conceive an overall idea like the pros and cons of hitchhiking?
No, I don't do it every day, but no, I never kind of sit down and try and think of ideas. As I'm going, ideas arrive, and I go, that's not a bad idea, and I may make a note of it somewhere, and then I'll come back to it later, and then maybe it'll develop, and I'll sit down at the piano one day and work out some chords or a melody that comes together with a bit of an idea. The difficult bit, all that happens without me trying at all. I don't have to try. The difficult bit then is developing those short ideas into full-length things. That's where the craft comes in, and the graft is then that does take a long time. Well, it can do. And sometimes absolutely the hardest things are, you've written 2 verses and a bridge to a song, and you've got to write a last verse. And sometimes to write that last verse can become an absolute nightmare.